I'd like to call to order the City of Sumner City Council study session. The date is the 25th of October and the time is 6 p.m. And yet another reminder, on June 30th, Governor Inslee issued the Washington Ready Guidelines, effectively reopening the state of Washington and removing the COVID-19 restrictions. City of Sumner looks forward to welcoming members of the public to its meetings in person, and until further notice, will continue to conduct its meetings 100% virtually using the Zoom platform. And the public has been invited to attend this meeting using the access information on the council agenda and on our website. And with that, I will call the roll. Botetto.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Hamilton.
Here.
Hayden.
Here. Here.
Okay, Hochstetter.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
All council members are present. We have two items under regular business. First one is setting the 2022 ad valorem property tax levy. And do I call on you, Mr. Wilson?
Sure, I can introduce it. Tonight, Chief Financial Officer Raymond will be presenting on our annual property tax levy. This has gone to Finance Committee and she'll be going over their recommendation as well as our change in assessed value. So with that, Cassandra.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is run through just a short PowerPoint presentation with some information from our preliminary certification of our assessed valuation for tax year 2022 and the Finance Committee discussion, and then open it up for discussion if that's all right. So just a couple of reminders about our property taxes. In 2021, our property taxes make up about 24% of the revenues into our general fund. This is our most stable source of revenue. Property taxes are considered essentially 100% collectible. In 2015, Council began authorizing an increase for our general fund, building reserves, sidewalks, and streets and arterial streets. That funding is used to leverage grant opportunities. And we've seen that working over the past several years, and those funds are in fact being used to leverage those grants. In addition, in 2017, Council authorized an increase for general fund operations and the City Council Strategic Reserve. So that was effective in tax year 2018. That has been accruing each tax year about $350,000 annually. And in the 2021 budget, Council approved using $1 million of that to support the construction for the Main and Wood intersection improvements. The process for the property tax for tax year 2022, we do have a public hearing scheduled for next week. We have a resolution that will come before Council on November the 15th, and then that resolution has to be passed and our levy request certified to Pierce County no later than November the 30th. Just taking a look, this is our property tax distribution for tax year 2021. You can see that the City of Sumner gets about 8% of our overall property tax assessment. The Sumner Bonnie Lake School District, it has the lion's share, about 48%, and then East Pierce Fire and Rescue at about 15%. All of the distributions you see in red are voter approved, and that ranges from anywhere from the fire district to school district assessments to our library, in Sound Transit, and our conservations. This is looking at our tax year 2021. So this will give you the baseline of where we're at. Our levy amount was $3.4 million. And that was to support the general fund operations. City Council Strategic Reserve, $350,000. And then $330,000 that's really split between supporting street operations and street capital. And again, that goes to support the leveraging of grant opportunities for street projects. Our preliminary certification, we get a preliminary certification from Pierce County every September, and this gives us what our new assessed valuation is anticipated to be, as well as what the value of our new construction and improvements was, and what amount we'll be able to re-levy for that. These are the numbers that we base our levy request on. We will get a final certification in December that usually doesn't vary by much from the preliminary certification. You can see for tax year 2022, we have about a 15% increase in our overall assessed valuation. For the single family residence, that is about a 17% increase in the assessed valuation. Of course, that's the average citywide. Some single family residents may have been less, some may have been more. When we look at our new construction and improvements, this is the amount of projects that were in progress at the last levy in the county provides us this number so that we can levy that amount and add that to our property tax rolls. We've got about a 31% decrease in our new construction and improvement. That's really not a strong indicator of any downturn, anything like that. This really just is the timing of when construction projects are complete. The value of the new construction and improvement, this is the amount that we can levy in this upcoming tax year to essentially bring those projects onto the tax rolls. When we brought the information to Finance Committee, what we really wanted to do was get some direction on the committee's preference for the percentage increase over the prior year, so over tax year 2021's levy, the dollar amount levied. And so we discussed a variety of different increase levels. We looked at what the levy rate, what the city portion of the property tax would be for the average single family residence, and then the monthly change from 2021. So we looked at what it would be at a 1% increase. So these percentage increases aren't over the levy rate, they're over the dollar amount that we levied in 2021. So we have at 1%, we would see a monthly change of $1.91 for the average single family residence. At 2.5%, a monthly change of $2.44. A 4% increase over the prior amount levied would be an additional monthly charge of about $2.97. And then looking at what it would be if we essentially tracked the increase in our property tax levy amount to what our current CPI is, which is 5.5%. And that would be an additional $3.50 per month for the average single family resident. As we brought this information to Finance Committee, the recommendations that came out of committee, we actually were split between two different rates, a 1% increase and a 2.5% increase over the prior year amount levied. And what I've done is I've broken this down as to what our tax year 2020 levy was, what the increase would be, and then factoring in the additional revenue from new construction and improvement, the additional revenue from administrative refunds. This is a little arithmetic game that Pierce County adds onto our property tax. This is the ability to re-levy for a property that has been either considered damaged or for some other reason taken off of the tax rolls. You can see it's pretty immaterial. What our total 2022 levy would be, and then what the levy rate per 1,000 would be. And then here what we did was really take those two recommendations and apply them to the average single family homeowner and what that would look like. The city portion of the property taxes based on the average single family residential values for 2021 was $414.10. And so you can see what the changes would be at a 1% lift and at a 2.5% lift. And I'm happy to go over those numbers. We try to make that as transparent as we could. And then the ask this evening really is for council direction on the preparation of our resolution and our levy request to Pierce County, looking at either the 1% or the 2.5%. Council direction on whether we'll be retaining levying for the City Council Strategic Reserve in the street operations and capital amounts. And then we will put together that information for, again, a public hearing for next week and a vote on the property tax resolution on November 15th. So that's the information I have, opening up for discussion, and I will switch back to whichever slide you like me to.
Thank you very much, Cassandra, for the presentation. And so you have one person has raised their hand. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with the 2.5%. At the end of the day, it was less than $7. So I would go with that one.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try to be as expedient as possible here. So I understand the statutory maximum 1% applies this year as much this year as any other because of the 5.5% inflation. But I do not agree that it's appropriate to go into our emergency funding via the banked capacity, our bank tax capacity, especially when current projected sales tax revenue are really strong. I objected to this move in 2017 when the bank capacity was used by council during a huge budget surplus. I have the same objection now with similar surpluses in our budget. I'm very much in agreement with the staff salary increases to make the city competitive and up to date, but I think it's a mixed message for the public to adjust staff salaries using existing funds while claiming we need to increase reserve taxes to meet expenses. I do not believe this is the time to increase spending on the back of the taxpayers when existing revenues do not require it. And that is my comment.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Other council members? Questions or comments? Go ahead, Josh.
I was just wondering, I kind of would like to hear from council members Potato and Newman about why they are supporting the 2.5% versus the 1%.
I think that's a fair request. Go ahead, Charlotte.
So, and I don't know if Councilmember Potato wants to weigh in. My take on it was like, it was kind of finding a balance. I think staff had initially, and I don't even view it as versus the 1% in terms of some of the staff arguments made were somewhere even between 3 and 4%, which, and we don't always get everything that we need, but I do think it's worthwhile to take in account the automatic 5% increase, like cost of living increases that we're going to have to make across the board. I also know that for the last like 20 years, Sumner's kind of been, I would just say very cautious about any property tax increases. And so I landed and also looking at the difference between, and sorry, the 2% isn't up here, but the 2% and the 2.5% just also seemed very nominal. And I'm not comfortable enough yet to think that 1% is quite enough to cover all of the city's needs moving forward. And so anyway, so those were kind of the reasons why I landed somewhere in the middle.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Go ahead, Barb.
Yeah, I'd agree with her. If cost of living is going up 5.5%, it means not just the salaries, but any other things we have to buy as part of the city, those prices are going up. So I'd rather, increase it to the 2.5% so that we aren't stuck like a year from now, going, we have to cut back on certain programs. So that was my thinking. And I just would rather keep us ahead of the, have a little more of a cushion than to just, be left needing more money. So.
Thank you very much, Barb. Patrick, I know you have your hand raised, but I'm going to give other council members the opportunity to speak to this before calling on you again. Go ahead, Cindy.
Is my internet coming through okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, because everybody else has been bouncing around for me, so I was wondering. So this one's for Ms. Raymond, and this new construction and improvements, I need to understand how that works. Is even though that showed a negative on there, but isn't it when new businesses or new homes or new businesses, is that where those are being put on the rolls? And that's what added to who we can collect from?
That's exactly right. So the new construction and improvement, these are projects that were in progress at the last time our assessed valuation was calculated. And so Pierce County tracks those and tracks for completion. And as they're added to the property tax rolls, we're provided the value of that, of those new constructions and improvements. And then we have the opportunity to levy the property tax. So you can think of it that these were things that that were completed within tax year 2021, but because they were in process before we got our 2021 valuation, they weren't levied against. So now we're having that chance to kind of catch up and bring those onto the tax roll.
But why is that a negative, like negative 31%?
So really all that's looking at is what our new construction and improvement assessed valuation was for tax year 2022 versus tax year 2021. So that's just a difference in what was constructed and what was built, and the timing of when new construction is coming onto the property tax rolls. So it's really
okay.
No,
It has nothing to do with it. I mean, it's just showing the difference between one year and another. The number
Yes.
we're going to be able to add to the tax rolls,
Yep.
say for 2022, is the 97,000. Is that
97 million.
okay? And then what about, I've never quite understood this bank capacity thing.
Sure.
I think, and it's like, don't we just have 7%? And so what happens when we use part of that?
So we have a maximum legal lawful levy. It's a mouthful.
Are you frozen or am I frozen?
Can you hear me? Okay. Councilmember
Cindy?
Hochstatter, can you hear me?
I think that's a no.
I'd like to hold off on answering until she can hear me.
Yeah, correct.
Hello?
Can you hear
Now
me
you're
now?
coming through, Cindy. Can you hear us?
Okay, so I missed all that. So should I just call Cassandra tomorrow?
Well, no, why don't you cover it? Go ahead and go over it again, Cassandra.
I actually waited for you, Councilmember Hochstatter.
Okay.
So the bank capacity, we have a maximum legal lawful levy. So that's the maximum amount that we're allowed to levy under the statute. We don't levy our maximum amount. So we levy a dollar amount that's below that amount. So the difference between the maximum legal lawful levy and what we actually request for our property tax levy is banked. And that's what they call the banked capacity. If we were to levy our maximum legal lawful levy for tax year 2022, it would be about a 9.5% increase over last year's collections. So we're leaving capacity kind of in the bank. It doesn't roll over and accrue every year. So it's not like if we leave 300,000 last year and 300,000 this year, that we have 600,000. It's recalculated every year based on, I believe it's the 1985 maximum levy increased by 1% every year. So the banked capacity is just really that amount that's still available for us to levy.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Cassandra. And I'm going to weigh in on this one because staff asked me what my druthers were between the 1, the 2.5, and the 5. And of course, I'd love the 5, but that isn't tolerable. And for me, even with the economic growth, it still goes back to the factor that inflation over time is going to exceed our ability to raise revenues. And so at a certain point, you're going to have those lines intersecting. And to the degree that we keep it at the 1%, it's going to bring that intersection of those lines of revenue versus expenditures sooner rather than later. So when I was looking at it with staff, the 1 versus the 2.5, I was definitely in the 2.5% because even though, as Patrick says, we've been blessed with economic development and increased revenue. At a certain point, all those blessings are great, but they will still intersect, and we're going to be faced with some tough challenges of either trying to raise additional revenue and or cut services. So to me, it's a compounding thing to the degree that you say at the 1% over X number of years, it brings those intersecting lines closer. So with that, I'm going to shut up. Sorry, but I had to get my 2 cents worth or whatever percent worth out on the table. You haven't heard, let's see, Josh asked a question. Kurt, do you have anything, any questions or any comments?
Yeah. Is it my turn?
Go ahead, sir.
All right. Mr. Raymond, is this for 1 year or 2 years?
This is just for tax year 2022, so 1 year.
All right. So if shit hit the fan, we did do something next year, right?
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
we will have this conversation every October.
Right. You've told us that we have more revenue from taxes than was expected,
Yes.
right? Yeah. And I don't remember hearing that raising taxes was part of the new salary increase. I don't remember that being part of it.
It is not.
All right. Also, we hear a lot about seniors in Sumner not being able to afford the cost of living. So, it isn't much more, but I favor 1%. Cassandra, how much money is in the reserve?
So we have a couple of different reserves. We have our general fund reserve fund, which has about $980,000 in it.
No, I'm sorry. How much is in the city council strategic reserve?
So the council strategic reserve fund, I actually pulled those numbers. At the end of 2021, it'll be $404,000, and that's after the $1 million was committed to Wood and Main. So a little over $400,000. At the end of 2022, if council elects to move forward with what we've been doing and levying the $350,000, it'll be $754,000.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm really in favor of 1%. And if we have to reduce how much we put in the council's reserve, I'm in favor of that. But I do not want 2.5%. That's it?
That's it. Thanks, Kurt. Okay, I believe we've heard from Josh, Kathy, Cindy. We heard from them. Go ahead, Patrick.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do have a question for Cassandra. So on sales tax projections for next year, if I remember correctly, we've always been very conservative in that projection, but even lifting it a little bit, we're looking at 2.5% increase projected.
So we're looking at 3% for 2021 and then 2.5% for 2022. Yes.
Okay. And in order to make up the difference from the 1 and 2.5% would take less than a 1% increase in sales tax collection, correct?
Roughly, I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So, and that goes back to the discussion. And thank you, Councilmember Brown, for pointing out the council directed funds. We have 400,000 in there without a designation, and it will continue to grow. I do not see, I struggled with agreeing to the 1% to offset inflation, but I definitely, the 2% just does not make sense from a revenue standpoint in my mind.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Go ahead, Josh.
So when we talk about the 5.5%, are we talking that's just inflation? So that is what costs have gone up, or are we talking that's what the average income has gone up? Because I don't know, in my mind, if costs have gone up 5.5%, but maybe people's income hasn't, I don't like adding extra burden on people.
So the 5.5% is CPI. So that is the Consumer Price Index, which really is the cost of, it's the cost of goods.
Okay. I mean, from a timing standpoint, I guess I would be in favor of the 1% as well.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Other questions or comments, council members? You can take your second shot. Go ahead, Barb.
So what would 2% look like?
Half a percent less than 2.5.
Okay. I mean, how much difference would that make, I guess? Okay.
So it's an additional, it's a difference of about $20,000. The difference between, this would be the change from the 2021 levy per month. At 2%, it would be $2.27 per month. And at 2.5%, it's $2.44 per month. Thank you for letting me bust out my Excel spreadsheet.
That was pretty impressive.
And that's on the average price of the house of, or the average value of a house of 400 and some odd dollars. 50.
It is. So
yeah,
we use
439.
We use the Pierce County certifications so that we know that we're using the most current data. The AV for 2021 taxes was about 376,000, and that increased to 439,000 for tax year 2022. And again, you know, we're going to see some homes that have a smaller increase in their AV, and some, frankly, that might have a larger increase in their AV. And so what they'll actually pay for the city portion of their property taxes will be based on their assessed valuation divided by 1,000 and then multiplied by our levy rate.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I see your hand raised, Patrick. I'm still checking the rest of the troops here. Anybody else? Councilmember Hochstetter, go ahead, Cindy.
Well, this is beginning to be a tough choice for me. And that is the fact that it just seems like the whole world is doing spending. And we're going to end up having to pay for all this. And so it just makes me a little unsure of what to expect for the nationwide economy. So it just really does give me some pause to think about this seriously. I don't know which way to go right now.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Okay, Patrick, I'll call you in a third time. I don't know if there'll be a fourth.
Well, if there's debate still going, it continues, but.
2 point. Go ahead.
So just to confirm, it's actually a quick question for Cassandra. The average impact to the property owner in Sumner was a 17% increase in their taxes already realized, correct?
No, so it's not an increase in their taxes, it's an increase in their assessed valuation.
Assessed valuation, okay, well,
Yes.
which translates to an increase in their tax collection.
Well, but the city also has so the increase in the assessed valuation overall was 15% for the city. And so what we do is we take the amount levied and it's divided essentially by 1,000. And then it's divided into the dollar amount we levy. So what we're really doing is we're spreading that overall levy dollar, the levy amount through the assessed valuation. So, the new properties that came on, so the additional new construction and improvement, they're picking up their share now, which kind of dilutes the impact, as well as, and again, it depends on individual assessed valuations. Someone whose house assesses for 25% is going to pick up some of the share from someone whose house maybe only increased 10%. So I think I ran the numbers, and when we're looking at a 1 or 2.5% increase over the dollar amount we levied last year, the average impact is less than 6% to the city portion of the property tax. Yeah. So it's not that the 17% is reflected in the dollars that we end up collecting. That was just in the assessed valuation.
No, and I appreciate that. I was looking at more at the overall impact for the property owner, all things considered, for not just for the city collection, but overall impact for the property owner.
But it's hard to say that a 17% AV is going to translate into a 17% increase. It depends on the levy rates, and what happens with the state, with the schools, with the fire district. All those kind of combine in. We're only seeing 8% of the overall property tax bill.
Yeah, exactly.
So I will say that when the property tax bills come out, we're the ones that get the phone calls.
Yeah.
So we do a fair amount of explaining that, about 8% of that impact is us.
I try to share that wonderful pie chart as much as I can. That really brings it back into focus.
Thank you.
I know for me individually, for our property, our net increase in collection was 18% for this year. But thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other council members? Questions or comments? Okay, go ahead, Cindy.
Cassandra, the county tax assessor still has the program that if you're a senior citizen that you can apply and have your property taxes somewhat lowered, don't they?
Yes, they've got both a senior program as well as a disabled persons program.
Okay, any other questions, Cindy? Okay, I think that's, no, I don't know if can you hear me, Cindy? There you are. Now, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can now. So was the answer yes, that the program is still in place?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, is that it, Cindy?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, here's what I would propose moving forward. You have an ordinance will be coming before you with the 2.5%. I'd ask that staff have an amendment crafted that reflects the 1%. That if any council member wishes to amend that to reflect the 1% approach as opposed to the 2.5%, they can do so, and we'll find out where things land, because we're really sort of split down the middle on this thing. Anyway, that's what I would propose. So Jason, Cassandra, could you do that? Go ahead, Jason.
There, yeah, we can certainly do that, and we'll put that together. Like you mentioned, we are holding a public hearing next week. The documentation for that, I believe Cassandra says 2.5%. So any amendment would have to come from the dais. Real quick, staff does need a little bit of direction on the council strategic fund as well as the matching streets grant. If you want to see those remain in place, we need to make sure those are earmarked. Right now, they are scheduled to. So
right now, the way it's written, they're scheduled to be included, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So I need a general head nods or whatever from the council as to whether they want to continue including that. Go ahead, Charlotte.
Yeah, I would hope that these are considered like separately. Like, I would like to see that council funds stay in place regardless of whether we end up with a 1% or a 2.5% increase. If it hadn't ever been used, I might argue differently or have some concern. But I do think, as we see it, that it'd come in handy for these emergency like budget issues, such as, Wood and Main. We've been waiting for so long, and there's going to be no other way to pay for that. Like, I think it's fine that it takes 2 to 3 years for it to accumulate to something, to pay for something meaningful like that. But just because there's a little bit of accumulation this year, and we knew we had that remaining 350 after we appropriated the million for just the just over 1 million for Wood and Main. So I have not heard a good reason yet for it to not be there. And so I have strong feelings about it still continuing.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Next, call on Barb. Go ahead.
Well, wouldn't it make sense to do your for us to hear from the public next week before you make changes before making the ordinance, instead of because right now I am, some of the arguments are making me reconsider the 2.5. So, and I'd kind of like to hear from the public.
Well, Barb, I think that's exactly what we're talking about process-wise, is you have to have something for the public to consider and to testify to. And if it's the 2.5, you're going to have the hearing and you may hear from the public. And then when it gets to actual council action on it, you take that public comment into consideration along with discussion that you've all had, and whether you want to go with the 2.5 or whether you want to make an amendment to the 1%.
Okay. All
right. And the same, I think right now what we're trying to do is do we include the city council strategic reserve and the street operations and capital reserve, regardless of whether it's 1 or 2.5%? Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Bart, is that it?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Patrick.
Kind of a follow-up question on the strategic reserve piece. So would this banked capacity continue to contribute toward that? Would it be funneled into the strategic reserve and streets fund in the same manner that the existing bank capacity was? Or is it being presented as going directly to general fund?
So it goes either into the general fund or into the street capital fund, but it goes in as a reserved amount. So it's not commingled with unrestricted funds. It's listed as a committed fund. Essentially that council has earmarked this for specific council use, and it's written into the resolution levying the amount that it's for council appropriation during the budget cycle.
Okay, so that extra 1.5%. So to explain where I'm coming from is the 1% would typically be a general fund revenue, but that extra 1.5 coming from the bank capacity. I mean, in the event that the majority of council went with the 2.5%, would I need to then amend or offer an amendment to make sure that extra 1.5 went into the strategic fund, or would it already go there?
It would already go there. The way the resolution is written is that a certain levy rate of the overall rate is dedicated towards that purpose.
Okay. I think that clarifies it for me. Thank you. So the extra 60-something thousand coming from the 1.5%, should it go that direction, would go to the strategic fund already, but that 1% would be kind of bifurcated into the general fund revenue. Or would the whole 2.5% go into the?
Go ahead, Jason. I think we're making it too complex here. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're just confusing the two. So just to be clear, whether it's a 1% or a 2.5% lift, the money that you have previously designated for the council strategic reserve as well as the street fund will continue that. The 1 and the 2.5%, whatever revenue comes in from that will go into the general fund as uncommitted.
Unless there's a motion to commit that extra 1.5 to the strategic fund in the same fashion.
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to see that prepared as well, please.
Okay. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, just so you know where I am, I still agree with the 2.5% over the 1% for $6.32 a year. I think I can handle that. And I think a lot of people could handle that. And I do also would like to keep the rest in there, the strategic fund and the sidewalks. So that's where I am.
Okay. Go ahead, Cindy.
Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I just wanted to speak out still in support of the committed funds going into the council reserve and the other. So the more we discuss it, the more confused I got on it, but I like it the way it's been, where there's been some that the council gets a part in to help make have it grow and then help make a decision on what it's used on. I really like that part of this situation. And I like having the money set aside for our matching grants. I think that's just been a gem of a product. So, and Bill, I missed what you said. We're going to go with the 2.5 at the
we had
the hearing.
what
And
I was
then if there's a
suggesting-
change after that, we'll make that.
Correct. The hearing would be what we presented to you. You're going to hear from the public. And then when it gets to council action, council always has the ability to amend what is before them. And staff talked about having that amendment, ready for any council member to make. And so you can amend that. So it would be at the 1% versus the 2.5. And then we go through the voting process and see what happens. Where Jason was coming from, he wanted to make sure that there was a general thumbs up from the council that either the 1% or the 2.5% included separate reserves for the city council strategic reserve. Sorry. The city council strategic reserve and the street operations and capital. And,
Yes.
and I think there's general, what I'm seeing around on my screen is there's general support. Yes, we want to include those in whatever actions taken by the council, whether it's at the 1% or 2.5%.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. And then Patrick, I just want to make sure I'm clear in terms of what you are asking, because it was different than what I just said, I believe.
Sort of. It is tough because there's multiple angles to it, because I see it as one issue is the continuance of the strategic fund in the streets fund with the existing levy that was put in place from 2017. And I'm in favor of keeping that separate. And then the next issue is with this new levy, the 1 versus 2.5% is that if it comes forward to council as a 2.5%, then anything over 1, so that extra 1.5% that's coming, anything coming from bank capacity, I would like an amendment that would put that also into the strategic fund, not general.
Got it, Mayor.
Okay. Good. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure, Patrick, that what staff puts together, it hits what you were throwing at them. So, and I think it did now. So thank you.
Yeah, so it would be, 2 amendments, one to only do the
Right.
1% versus 2.5%. And then the second amendment would be for anything over 1% or anything coming out of bank capacity to go strategic.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, I just hope that next week that we have so many options. It's messy. So I worry about that.
We'll try to be as straightforward as possible at the hearing, Kurt. I don't know, and we can talk as staff as to how to make sure that we get the issue before the council. Before the public at the hearing. I appreciate what you're saying there. Okay. Other council comments? Questions? Okay, we'll prepare those amendments. We'll get to our public hearing and see what the public has to say, and then the tough work comes back to you when we get to the next council meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. Thanks for the quick work on the spreadsheet. That was amazing.
That is my world.
Boy. Okay, now we go to the pandemic response update. And Jason, I think I call on you.
Mayor, let me just get my screen share going here. All right, thank you, Council. Staff tonight wanted to give you a quick update on some of the pandemic issues that we've been dealing with as of late.
Jason,
yes, sir.
Just so you know, you're on preview mode, or I think.
Thank you. Let's try that.
That works a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always hard to tell which screen we're on here. All right. You're going to be hearing from a couple staff members tonight on different areas that they've been working on. We're going to start with Admin Services Director Steffens, who's going to go over the city's utility assistance program.
Good evening. I just wanted to provide a quick update on our utility assistance program. We recently updated our program, I think, for the 3rd time now, and it was presented to the Finance Committee back at the beginning of October. As you might know, the governor's moratorium on utility disconnections expired at the end of September, so it was important to get this plan in place and updated. The city will resume sending out disconnect notices at the beginning of November, but with those notices, we also include guidance on utility support programs, as well as the ability for customers to enter into a payment plan with the city. The city's plan at this point is to not start assessing penalties or doing disconnects until January of 2022. But we are going to provide those notices just so customers can be aware that they're in jeopardy of being disconnected in January. With our customer assistance plan, we've created different payment plan options for customers to enroll in. Our payment plans allow customers to repay their overdue balance over a 12-month period. So they would need to be making current payments as well as paying 1/12 of whatever their past due balance is at the point in time they enter into the payment plan. Customers that are on payment plans will not have any collection action taken against them. There will be no penalties assessed, no disconnects, and no liens on properties. These payment plans will need to be approved by the property owner for rentals for tenants. And that's really because the utility account lies ultimately with the property owner. So we want to make sure that the owner or the landlord is aware that a customer is in a payment plan. Currently, we are looking at roughly 244 residential accounts across the city that are 120 or more days past due. Those 244 accounts make up a total balance of $158,000. And then on our non-residential side, we're looking at 60 accounts that are 120 days or more past due with a total balance of $104,000. These two numbers have stayed fairly consistent as far as the number of accounts that are past due over the past few months. We've been continuing to monitor this. We have, as it says here, we've been providing lots of notice and information to customers, calling on the phone or in the bills as far as reaching out to the county for assistance, as well as our ability to get them onto a payment plan. We have customers that are going through the process now with the county. We have customers that are working on filling out payment plans. So it's kind of all in motion, but I think really we'll see a big uptick here over the next probably 2 months. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to the next slide.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Next up, I wanted to spend just a minute talking about the Pierce County Rental and Utility Assistance Program. As a reminder, the majority of the assistance being doled out is at the county level. They got a lot of extra money that they were provided that is specifically meant to go out and help, and from a regional approach. Talking to Heather Moss with Pierce County, as of last week, there have been 336 applications from our zip code. Just a reminder, 98390 does encompass a little bit of unincorporated Pierce County. Of those 336, 202 are pending and 134 have been paid. What I found interesting is out of those 134 that's been paid, a little over $1.6 million of assistance has come into our community, averaging just under $12,000 per distribution. The vast majority of that is for rental payments, a little over 1.5 million. Second is about $60,000 worth of utility bills. So as Jeff mentioned, we are continuing to refer people to Pierce County. The application period is still open, and if anybody's watching from home and is behind on their city utility bills, encourage them to reach out to Pierce County. There's also a link to the assistance program on our utility webpage. Next up is the ARPA committee. The council ARPA committee continues to meet on a regular basis. The next meeting is next Tuesday. So far, they have recommended to council some funds for allocation, which were back in August. Since then, they've reviewed several county business assistance programs, most of which are still in development, and are considering partnership with the county on those. We've submitted collaborative project funding requests to Pierce County. This is some sort of partnership opportunity. The county would fund some of a project, and then it would be augmented either with city ARPA funds, general fund, or private funds. So those three projects were the Kincaid Cherry Pedestrian Plaza. This promotes economic development, small business growth, and resiliency amongst our small business community. The community food bank parking lot improvements. This is to increase their capacity to respond to the pandemic. They've seen an increase in the number of customers that are seeking their services, and they have a very limited parking area at this time. And then the Viewpoint Tank Waterline Extension. This is a $1 million waterline project along Eli Hill, which would enhance the development opportunities for about 10 acres out in unincorporated Pierce County, as well as provide enhanced services to the neighborhood that is up there that's that you access off of Eli Hill, as well as the restaurant that's up there. And then the committee continues to review some other city-led economic development projects, such as incubators, commissary kitchens, and some possible development grants. Next up, fall and winter special events. So what's on? Street of Treats is scheduled to take place next weekend. And then going into November, the Sumner Historical Society tree lighting is scheduled for Saturday the 20th. I believe it's a Saturday. Yeah, Saturday the 20th. And then SMSA has a few sales events that are on the calendar. Hometown Holidays, which is the 20th, as well as Small Business Saturday on the 27th. Also, the Our Lady of Guadalupe procession, which is on December 12th, is also scheduled to occur. What's not going to happen? Bridge lighting and the Santa Parade. Bridge lighting, remember, this is an old cannery sponsored event and hosted event, rather, which is then sponsored by the city. And after a lot of discussion with the cannery, and then also just thinking about how long ago you have to start planning these events, we both came to the conclusion that it was not going to be in our best interest to have those. We've also been in contact with the health department, and they expressed some concerns as well, and how we'd have to manage the face covering requirement for both bridge lighting and Santa Parade. Santa Parade, same thing. Over 5,000 people attend the Santa Parade, and packing them onto the sidewalk, and the city, being the host of that, be responsible for making sure that people are safe at that event. So just felt it was in our best interest. Both the mayor and deputy mayor and staff got together and felt that it was not in our best interest to hold those events this year. Next up, COVID-19 staff impacts. This was a bit surprising. Since August 1st, we've had 28 instances of employee COVID-19 contact. And when I say contact, I mean either close contact with somebody that's positive COVID or contracted COVID themselves. So out of those 28, 29% were positive cases, and that represents 7% of our total population. Interestingly, all instances were among City Hall or police work groups. None of these were in our field operations staff. In response to this, we did adjust City Hall staffing, reducing the amount of hours that were open to the public as well, which then directly correlates to the amount of staffing that we need to have in the building. Any questions on what I've covered so far before we get into the next few slides?
Any questions for Jason? Go ahead, Barb.
So I heard over the weekend that the Downtown Association lost their director. Do you have any comment or?
It was disappointing to hear that Jill has moved on to other ventures, and I wish her luck. And we look forward to continue working with SMSA and all of their upcoming events, and whoever the new executive director is.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, any other questions for Jason? Don't see any, Jason, go ahead.
Okay, so the next several slides deal with vaccines. This is a little early, but we felt it'd be a good idea to educate council on what we are likely to see in the coming weeks and what steps staff will be taking. You may remember about a month ago, President Biden announced that he was directing OSHA to come up with some vaccine standards for businesses over 100. So we do anticipate that is likely to impact us. And there's some obligations that we have once that rule goes into place. And obviously, there's a lot of unknowns at this, but we felt that it'd be good to start having conversations with you now. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea. She's going to go over the process, and her and I are going to tag team the next several slides.
Okay, before we go to Andrea, Patrick, you have your hand raised?
Yes, but I think I can wait until after they're done presenting, because I have a kind of clarifying questions on how that would work. But I can wait a moment.
Okay, thanks, Patrick.
So back on September 9th, President Biden announced that he was directing OSHA to establish what's called an emergency temporary standard. Think of it like an interim development regulation, something that's in place for the short term, for the duration of the emergency, doesn't require a lot of public process and can be implemented really quickly. So he directed OSHA to establish an ETS that would apply to companies with 100 or more employees, and it would require a vaccination with a weekly test out option as the only alternative. So the state of Washington is one of about half the states in the United States that has its own state occupational safety and health plan. It's called DOSH. And for any state that has its own state plan, after the federal ETS is published, those states have 30 days to adopt their own set of rules that are at least as effective or more restrictive than the federal rule. So knowing that the state of Washington is one of those states, after the ETS is published, we'll wait the 30-day clock until the state publishes its own set of rules. Based on some hints that Governor Inslee gave in one of his previous press conferences, we do anticipate that the state rule will be more restrictive than the federal rule, but we don't know that for sure just yet.
All right, so how does this play out with our staff? So looking at our staff, excluding elected officials, so this is all of our employees. Right now, 68% of our staff is vaccinated and 32% are not, or at least they have not provided us proof that they are fully vaccinated. So that represents 37 employees. I want to point out that we had quite a number of employees that were initially vaccinated, and since about the end of July, I don't believe we've had one single employee be added to this list. So these numbers are very stable, have been this way for several months now. So looking at this by department or work group, you can see that City Hall staff, and this is just upstairs at City Hall, 74% are vaccinated. That means that 12 employees are not. Looking at our field crews, this is every employee that's in the field, that shops, cemetery, parks, those employees, 68% vaccination rate. Police, civilian staff, 55%, police sworn, 75%, and out at our treatment plant, 45%. So that's the breakdown. There's no, there are, groups like the treatment plant rather that have the lowest vaccination rate, but everybody else is pretty similar in that about 65 to 75% range of vaccination status right now. Andrea.
So as we've all heard in the news, right, there have been a number of cities and the state who have already implemented a vaccine mandate. And what we've seen following those vaccine mandates is that a certain percentage of staff are seeking exemptions from the vaccination. There are two categories of exemptions that staff, mostly the HR department, together with legal and a number of other staff members, will process administratively. And so for purposes of tonight, we just wanted to explain the process to council so that you understand how it will work if certain employees seek exemptions. The first is a medical exemption. All of them are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. There is no bright line rule here, and it is very difficult to fit every employee into a box and say all of them will be granted or all of them won't. It's an interactive process. That interactive process is developed and established by law and decades and decades and decades of case law. For a medical exemption to be considered, an employee has to demonstrate that they have a medical condition or a disability, and that has to be demonstrated through medical documentation. It has to be certified by a treating medical provider. And then after the medical disability or condition is demonstrated, the city goes through an interactive process to determine if a reasonable accommodation is available that would not be unduly burdensome to the city. And what cases have said is unduly burdensome is excessive expense to accommodate, or it would hinder or interfere with business operations such that an employee, for example, couldn't fulfill the essential functions of their position. So I've listed some example accommodations to a vaccine mandate down below. This list is not exhaustive, I have to say that. There are creative exemptions and accommodations, but there are also accommodations that are across the board unduly burdensome. And so we just wanted to let council see that list and know what to expect as we proceed with what we expect to be a vaccine mandate in the next couple of weeks. The second category of exemption is a religious exemption. These are also reviewed on a case-by-case basis. The employee is required to prove that they have a sincerely held religious belief that is in conflict with a mandatory vaccine. It must be a core tenet of somebody's religious belief not to receive the vaccine. This one is a little bit less rigid according to the law. It is very difficult to argue that something is not a sincerely held religious belief. So unless there's objective proof, conflicting statements or conflicting prior actions or even conflicting simultaneous actions, unless there's objective proof, religious exemptions are a lot more difficult to deny under the law. And so the burden, because of that, is lower. The burden must, if there's any de minimis impact or burden on the city's operations or any de minimis economic impact to the city, a religious exemption can be denied. But I just want to reiterate after going over both of those slides that the city will take any exemption requests very seriously. They will be processed accordingly with a lot of interactive conversation with the employee seeking an exemption or an accommodation, and they'll be given very special and lots of attention. And last but not least, we've gotten a couple of questions, not necessarily locally, but just on a statewide basis. Well, why doesn't the city go ahead and get out in front of what we expect the OSHA DOSH rule to be and mandate a vaccine? Many cities have actually already done so. And one of the reasons is that the standard when it comes to bargaining with represented employees is different. If you are following a state or federal legal mandate, it can be implemented. And on the back end of that implementation, you must bargain with the unions about the impacts of that legislation. If instead it is a policy of the city to implement something out in front of a legal mandate, the bargaining requirements are much stricter and lengthier, I would say. And it's highly unlikely at this point in time, given the fact that we anticipate the federal rule to be issued at any day now. At this point in time, implementing a citywide vaccine mandate would probably take longer than following the federal or state rule.
Andrea, just a second. Patrick, you re-raised your hand. And do you want to ask a question now?
I thought she was nearing the end. I'm sorry. I may have jumped the gun a bit.
That was the last slide. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Perfect timing, Patrick. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of questions. One is when DOSH adopts the federal order, the city is anticipating taking action based on that guidance, even if there are court battles taking place until something's decided?
Yeah, you're spot on. We anticipate that many states will file litigation to seek injunctions from the OSHA rule or to remove themselves from OSHA's requirements altogether, unless a federal court or the United States Supreme Court puts an injunction on the ETS. The city will have to comply.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, and just to clarify, because I have three more questions, and I am not anti-vax. I don't want anybody to get that impression, but I do have heartburn with the mandate, especially in the way, not necessarily just the mandate, but the way it's being rolled out. So that answers my question. That court action, the only time that would make a difference is if there's an injunction. And then is it going to require council action on policy when it does come forward?
It will not if it's a state mandated requirement. If like I just explained in the last slide, if the city were to unilaterally take action before it's a state law, yes, it would require council action. But if we are following OSHA, no.
And then on the exemption statuses, is the anticipation going to be that it would follow along with state, or is the city going to be a little bit less, I should say, a little less heavy-handed with it? Because through personal experiences and seeing many colleagues, the state approach is, even if a medical accommodation is made or exemption is accepted, it is then turned out as not able to accommodate. And I wouldn't think that we would take that approach.
It's really hard to say right now. Each will be considered on its own merit, and it will be very dependent on that employee's job duties and whether or not an accommodation is possible. So there really is no way to say how this will all turn out until we have the accommodation request in hand.
And that makes sense. And I appreciate that. It's just, I hate to see us potentially lose a big chunk of staff members, especially ones that have already had the virus and recovered and under doctor's orders doctor's care not to get the vaccine on top of the recovery, which is becoming more and more common. And that's one of the lawsuits I'm actually waiting to hear back about, is how those folks are handled. But I appreciate the answers, and it's not a council action item. It would be, we've been consistent about, right or wrong, sticking with what the guidance is coming from state and county. So, and I understand that and I appreciate that. I just don't always agree with it. So thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Go ahead, Josh.
There are still a lot of unknowns about how this actually is going to work, right? Like, do we know if it has to be a PCR test or can it be a home test? Does the city pay for that? The employee pay for it? Maybe you have some insight that I don't, because I'm kind of having to work through the same struggles.
So, we can only assume that any rule that comes out is going to be probably similar to what the state employees have been working with, the healthcare employees and school district employees. And I can tell you that OSPI, they recommend it as an accommodation for a qualified exemption, or an accommodation could be PCR testing. And if that is something that we are mandating the employee do, it does bring up the question of, how does that happen? And the test is one thing, right? Because the tests itself are free right now. But does that happen in our office? Does that happen at a testing site? Is the test itself, when you're doing the test, if it's not during your normal business hours, is that compensable time? The gut is yes. So those are all things that we're gonna have to work out and manage.
And
they
the
trigger some
delay.
bargaining.
And a delay in results sometimes too, right? You could
Correct.
have 2 days in results before your result is back.
Yeah, and then what happens during that if your test gets lost in the mail? Or, I mean, there's lots of little challenges to work through.
That you done, Josh? Joshua, we wish you well. Okay. Okay, Jason, any more than what you have right here in terms of additional slides?
No, Mayor, no extra slides.
Okay, then I go back to the council. Any other questions or comments on what you've seen and heard? Go ahead, Barb.
No, I just appreciate that the city has been very forward in addressing the whole issue of the COVID pandemic, because I remember when it first started, like in February a year ago, that already you had made plans. And I was thinking, well, this is a little premature, but it was really spot on. So I appreciate that you're taking the time now to be prepared instead of, oh, what should we do? So thank you.
Thank you, Barb. Kurt gave it a thumbs up. It's good. Okay, any other council questions or comments? Yeah, I would echo staff. You've done an incredible job so far, and it just never stops. It just keeps on coming, and they still have to keep on dealing with it. And it's amazing to watch. It's also painful when I see, what they have to go through. And then Josh, yeah, then we think it's bad here. Try the private sector. Yeah, it's tough there too. So, okay.
And don't worry, give it a couple weeks, it'll change again.
Amen, Patrick. I think you've got it exactly right. Yeah. Just when you think it was safe, it changes. Okay. Okay, that would end the regular business. Again, I want to thank staff and all of you for working through these issues. Good discussion tonight, and appreciated the various points of view. Move on to city administrator report. Mr. Wilson.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Okay, good answer. Agenda setting, both in terms of council calendar and committee calendars. Any issues? Everybody's happy. Everybody's going to be at the meetings, and we're all going to have a great time. It wasn't that enthusiastic there. Okay. Wow. Well, that's cool. Andrew, we do not have an executive session tonight. So that brings us to the fact that you've all done a great job tonight sharing your viewpoints and great discussion. But we have nothing left on the agenda, and seeing is that there's nothing left, this meeting will be adjourned at 7:18. Have a nice rest of the evening, everyone, and thank you again. Bye-bye.
Go
Have a
Hawks.
good night, everyone.
Go Hawks. There you are.